All right. Well, welcome to the Building Bookworms workshop. This workshop is focused on early literacy and what we as parents and caregivers can specifically do to start building those early literacy skills in our children. So this workshop is organized actually into 4 separate sessions. So this first session today is going to be focused on just exactly what early literacy is and the 6 skills that support it. And then in the next sessions, we're going to dive deeper into exactly how we can start building those skills. Okay, so just to introduce myself, my name is Kelly Carter. I work here at St. Louis Public Library. I work on the early childhood outreach team. And what we and my team kind of do, we do a lot of work in the community for that early childhood age range. We do monthly story times for early childhood centers. We do community story times. We put up storybook walks around the city. Anything early childhood related, we usually kind of have our hand in it. So this is something I am very passionate about. I really enjoy this work, and so I'm very excited to lead this workshop. All right. So objective for this session. Like I said before, today we're just going to go over what early literacy is and what those 6 early literacy skills are that we want to start developing. So let's get into what exactly do I mean when I say early literacy. So early literacy is the foundation to our children learning to read. So to be clear, this is not learning to read. Early literacy is the skills we want our children to have so that they are ready to learn to read when they get to school. So now, why is early literacy important? Besides the obvious, our children being ready to learn to read. Well, first, it's going to help with cognitive or brain development. So when we talk about brain development, the first 3 years of a child's life are actually very critical for brain development. And reading and listening to stories, it helps them start to develop that critical thinking, problem solving and memory skills. And then we move on to creativity. Reading really helps children's imaginations. Okay. It shows them new worlds, new things that their brains learn to understand. And this starts to help them develop their own new ideas. And then we have kind of what we were talking about, school readiness. Early literacy skills help children become school ready. And at the same time, it really sets the stage for lifelong learning. Okay. So children who are exposed to reading and writing from a young age, they're actually more likely to perform well academically and then become readers and writers themselves. And then a big one nowadays, concentration. Reading helps children start to develop their focus and really hone that attention span, which is really important nowadays. And attention span seems to be getting shorter and shorter. So reading will really, really help with that. Then a big one, social and emotional development. Reading together with your child is going to strengthen their relationship with you. Okay, so it's that bonding moment, right? It starts to develop their empathy, their compassion, and that is then going to be able to strengthen their relationship with others as well. And last, we have communication skills. Any kind of literacy experience with books, stories, songs, that's going to help them to express themselves more effectively. So early literacy really kind of helps with all of this, in addition to just getting them ready to learn to read. So I think it's easy to say, maybe a little obvious to say that early literacy is important. But I think kind of knowing a little more specifically as to how and why it's important really helps us in our journey of being parents. Okay. So now we know early literacy is the foundation that children need. We know why it's important. So now let's get into the specific early literacy skills that we're going to break down today. Our first one, print motivation. Print motivation is just enjoying books and reading. This comes from positive experiences associated with reading and stories and just having those lasting memories. Next up, we have phonological awareness. Phonological awareness, that's a tough one because it's kind of an umbrella term, kind of includes a lot. But simply put, it's being able to break a word down into its smaller parts. And like I said, we'll dive deeper into these and kind of explain that further. Third skill, print awareness. This one is just simply knowing that print has meaning and understanding that words mean something, and that's how we communicate. And number 4, letter knowledge. This is just knowing that letters have names and they represent sounds. Next, we have vocabulary. Very simple. It's just knowing the meanings of words. We want our children to have a wide range of vocabulary by the time they get to school. And the last early literacy skill, background knowledge. Now, background knowledge can actually be broken down into different types of knowledge, and we're going to dive deeper into that one in a bit as well. Okay, so these are those 6 early literacy skills that we want to develop in our children. And so what we're going to do now is take a closer look at each of these skills and give a few examples of what we can do to start building each skill. But before we get into each skill, I do want to go over Every Child Ready to Read. Every Child Ready to Read is 5 practices that we can use to build these skills. Those 5 practices are reading, writing, singing, talking, and playing. The idea is that if you are doing these 5 practices, you are essentially building those early literacy skills. And that's the beauty of Every Child Ready to Read. Through these simple practices, you are essentially building early literacy without even knowing it. A lot of these you may already be doing, but the theme of our workshop is being intentional. Okay, while you may already be reading or singing or playing, and that's great. You may already be doing these things with your child. We want you to continue these practices, but try to extend just a bit. Add a little bit of intentionality so you know why you're doing something, making it just that much more effective. Okay, so now, like I said, we're going to dive deep into each skill, show a few examples of how we can start developing them. And our first one is that print motivation. Remember, that's creating those positive experiences with reading and books. We want our children to be excited about reading and excited about books. And that is going to really develop that print motivation. Okay, so let's look at some examples here. You're going to see that they are broken down into age categories. Okay, we have birth to 2-year here. We have 2 to 3-year-olds and then 3 to 6-year-olds. But what I want to stress is that there's going to be a lot of overlap with these age categories. Okay, so if you're doing something with your 3-year-old that's actually in the birth to 2-year category, it's probably okay. Okay, these are just some soft guidelines, all right? Okay, so let's take look at a few here. Remember what print motivation, it's all about creating those positive associations with reading. So a lot of these examples are going to involve engaging activities, having fun and playing. With the birth to 2-year age range, singing or reciting nursery rhymes, it's a great way to build this skill. Children love to hear you sing. So this is going to be a fun and positive experience for them. Then in the 2 to 3-year category here, have fun with reading. Use expression, change your voice, act out the stories. Make it as fun as you can because that's how we want them to view reading, okay? It's a fun, engaging experience. And then the last one, a good one here, is sharing what your favorite book is and why. And the great thing about this is that you're modeling your love for reading. And modeling is so important at this period in a child's life. So by sharing this with them, it's going to encourage them to think of their own favorite book. Okay, now we are moving on to phonological awareness. Remember, this one was that kind of big umbrella term, kind of encompasses a lot. Phonological awareness is the breaking down of words into its smaller parts, but it includes a lot, okay? Like imitating environmental sounds. Environmental sounds would be like honk, honk, or animal sounds, a cow mooing, vehicle sounds saying vroom, vroom. Those are those kind of environmental sounds that really make you experiment with moving your mouth and making new sounds. Phonological awareness also involves rhyming, recognizing syllables in words, and even playing with the beginning sounds in a word. So phonological awareness, it involves a lot, but what you're going to see is that there are some really simple ways to start building this skill. It seems complicated, but there's some really fun and simple things we can do to build that. Okay, so some examples. In our birth to 2-year category, encouraging clapping or stomping while singing songs. Okay, so anytime you're singing, you're going to be building their phonological awareness. When you sing, it slows the language down and it allows them to hear all the smaller parts of a word. And clapping and stomping will start to lay that foundation because later they're going to be able to start clapping out syllables in a word. Just like we see in the 3 to 6 year category here, using clapping to hear syllables. And something to also add here too, while I said there's going to be a lot of overlap within these age categories, there's also going to be a lot of overlap with each skill. You can do one activity and actually be building multiple skills. And that's what's great about this. By clapping and singing a song, you'll build their phonological awareness, but you'll also be building their print motivation, what we just talked about as well, because they'll be having fun with it. So kind of 2 birds with 1 stone there, right? Okay, so now let's move on to print awareness. Remember, this skill is just understanding that connection between a word and its meaning. We want our children to understand that we use words to communicate, and that's why they have meaning. Okay, some simple things we can do for print awareness. Looking at our first category here, birth to 2 year, we can point to pictures and books and say the word. This is a very simple way to show the connection between something and its word. And through repetition, children will start to learn that word and its association. Now, moving into the 2 to 3 year category, pointing to the words while we're reading. So this is just taking it a little further. So while you're reading, you can run your finger under the words that you are reading. This is going to show them that you aren't just saying random words, you're reading the words that are written. And then as they get older, you can even take it further by talking about the role of the author, talking about how someone uses these words and makes a story out of them. Okay, moving on to letter knowledge. So far we've done print motivation, phonological awareness, and print awareness. Now moving on to letter knowledge. Remember, that's just that's knowing that letters have names, they represent sounds, and we put them together to form words. Now, when it comes to recognizing their letters, this actually requires 2 foundational skills. And those skills include 1, being able to recognize their shapes. When children start to recognize their letters, they recognize them by the shapes they see in the letters. So that is why learning shapes at a young age is actually very important. And then second, they need to be able to notice what is alike and what is different. We want them to be able to look at 2 similar looking letters and see what is different. Okay, so like I said, learning their letters involves learning their shapes and noticing what is alike and what is different. So you're going to see a lot of these examples involve building those skills, right? So we're not going to jump right into letters. There's nothing wrong with that. But like I said, there's going to be some foundational skills that we need first. So at the very young ages, they're going to be learning their shapes through books, blocks, songs about shapes, right? In the 2 to 3 year category, you'll see them playing matching games, okay? You can also start pointing out the letters in their name. because those are probably going to be some of the first letters that they learn, right? And then continuing as they get older, continuing to point out shapes and letters when they see them. Repetition and pointing letters out and using them is going to be a big part of learning these. Okay, so now moving on to vocabulary. So this is just the words that a child knows and recognizes. The more words that a child is exposed to, the more words they're going to know, and therefore, the easier learning to read will be. Remember, these are foundational skills that we want them to have so they are prepared to learn to read when they get to school. And I also really want to emphasize that children really learn words best by having authentic experiences with them, okay? Whether it's through a book or, playing and using the words, or just you having a conversation and using the new words and encouraging them to use the new words. These are great ways to start building vocabulary. Okay, so some examples to start building their vocabulary. A lot of these are just going to be ways to expose them to new words. Using repetition in the early years. Remember, there's going to be that overlap that we talked about. When pointing to a picture and saying the word, it's building that print awareness, right? The connection between a word and its meaning. But it's also building the vocabulary because they're learning that new word. In the 2 to 3 year category, using all kinds of words. Don't shy away from using big words with your child. Yes, maybe you need to repeat it a couple times. You might need to give them an explanation of what it means. You might need to give that explanation a couple times. They're not going to get it just after one use, so continue to use the word, but don't shy away from using it. Let them experience that new word and let them start to learn it. And then as they get older, like in a 3 to 6 year category, sharing nonfiction books. Really let their interests guide you here. If they really like a certain subject, try to get different books on that subject. And, they'll learn all kinds of new words just through that one interest. Okay, so our last skill, background knowledge. Now, earlier I said this one could be broken down into different types of knowledge. So let's go over those. First, we have content knowledge. And that one is simple. It's just what they know on a certain topic. So if they have an interest in dinosaurs, they have a lot of knowledge in dinosaurs. Then there's conceptual knowledge, and that is kind of just those higher thinking skills, the skills that we use to understand a story. And you see here, you see cause and effect, and that kind of may seem like an advanced skill, but really there's layers to it, okay? It can be as simple as discussing why a character feels a certain way, okay? Talking about how a character feels and then thinking about the why, or even thinking about the order of events that relate to each other. That's cause and effect. There's just different levels to it. And then last, there's book or story knowledge. That's just understanding how books work. Knowing that books are for fun, they're for entertainment, knowing that we can learn from books, knowing how a story works, understanding there's a beginning, a middle, and end. Just that kind of book and story knowledge. Okay, so that is background knowledge. We want our children to have these skills. So let's get into how we can build them. Okay, some examples here. Repeating nursery rhymes, simple stories. That's going to set the foundation of how a story works. And going back to that book and story knowledge. Recognizing the beginning, the middle, the end, right? It just kind of sets that foundation. Moving into 2 to 3 year category, starting to build those thinking skills. Ask those kind of higher thinking questions, like the cause and effect. Why does a character feel that way? What happened, right? Maybe even making predictions. Well, this just happened. What do you think is going to happen? Just kind of starting to set that foundation to get their brain conditioned to kind of start thinking outside of us, just what's on the page. And then as they get older, just continuing asking those questions. Maybe even having them retell a story after reading it. Maybe not even retelling it, but acting it out, playing it that way, right? Okay. So those are the 6 early literacy skills. We had print motivation. Okay. That was enjoying books and reading. Phonological awareness, being able to break a word down into its smaller parts. Print awareness, understanding the connection between a word and its meaning. Letter knowledge, knowing that letters have names, they represent sounds. Vocabulary, knowing the meanings of words, and then background knowledge, kind of just their prior knowledge that they have to understand a story. Now, don't be overwhelmed with knowing each of these terms and knowing their definitions. We definitely want to educate, but I think the important part of this workshop series is the application of how we're going to develop these skills. So as I said before, the theme of this workshop is being intentional. By knowing about these skills and understanding them to a degree, we can be more intentional in the activities we plan, or even just the small moments that we have with our children. Just being a little more intentional when reading a simple story, being a little more intentional when having those short conversations. Little things like that can really make a difference. Okay, so to kind of wrap up this first session, first, I want to emphasize that you are already doing a great job. Just by watching this session, it shows your desire to learn more and make your child's literacy a priority. So, good job. You're already doing a good job. And just a reminder, with all the examples we went over, remember, building literacy doesn't just have to be reading books. It can be singing. It can be playing. It can be as simple as talking and having a conversation. So remember to have fun, create those positive experiences, and make lasting memories. And just a quick look ahead, as I said before, this first session was just kind of setting us up by going over those 6 early literacy skills. Now, the next sessions are the ones you're really going to want to tune into. They're really going to get into how we can build those skills, doing some really simple things right there at home. So the next session is going to dive deep into reading and writing. The next session after that, we'll get into singing and talking. And the last session, we'll wrap up with playing. Remember, those are those 5 practices of every child ready to read. And in that last session, we're also going to share some really helpful resources with you guys as well. So thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next session.